show you a better way. You don't have to be.
Well, hi, folks. This is Jack Spirko with another edition of the Survival Podcast. As always, one man's view of the changing world, the changing times, and the things we can all do to live a better life. If times get tougher, even if they don't. Today is Thursday, June the 12th, 2025. This is episode 3687 of the Survival Podcast. And as a Thursday, it's time for an expert council Q&A show for the week. Here's what I got on the docket for you today. Dr. Paul and Chris Rossini in the Ron Paul Liberty highlights for the week will talk about the fact that it's been decade after decade of GOP promises that are never kept. And as long as I've been around, I'm going to say it's decade after decade after decade after decade. About 4 decades that I've been old enough to know what was being promised and ain't seen it. Hardly any of it ever happened. And in the macro, none of it has happened. It's all been bullshit. They'll talk about that today. Matt Sursley will talk about the tax implications of the Amtrak Act. Now, you might be thinking, I don't give a damn about choo-choo trains. It just doesn't apply to me. Actually, it has nothing directly to do with trains. That's just one mode of transportation. This has to do with taxation in a way that can really affect you adversely if you travel for work, and certain ways in which you can avoid that adversarial treatment by the IRS and state revenue agencies, especially the states of New York and California. That's a surprise, right? But this is an important one to listen to and to know about, because even if it doesn't affect you now, it may affect you in the future, or someone in your family or someone that's like a friend or an associate that you'll be able to help out with this really interesting little bit of knowledge. Andy McCann will talk about the balance between intensity and frequency in your workouts, and why, if you're gonna default to anything, you're probably better off defaulting to frequency rather than intensity for a variety of reasons. John Pugliano, investment manager, I should say, Supreme, will talk about why you might want to watch out right now for a summer sell-off in the market. And I'll tell you, I think it will happen, and I'll throw a little extra on John's fire at the end about why I believe it will. Kerry Brown is going to talk to you about finding elderberry for foraging and knowing, since it's something that's pretty easy to find, at least in some parts of the country, where do you find the stuff that's not contaminated with a bunch of pollution, like from road runoff and stuff like that. And then I'm going to talk about something that, it's not the kind of thing I really enjoy talking about, but I think it warrants being talked about today. The No Kings protest and the No Kings movement as a whole. The No Kings is the new BLM. But I'm going to rip it apart today. I've got a 9-part presentation for you on it. It lasts about 18-20 minutes. And we're going to go through the facade of the grassroots, who's funding it, the shell game, the media amplification, the way the whole plan works out. And by determining who's funding it, you can already predict the outcome, because the people that are funding it are the same people that funded other things, and we saw the outcome there. So it's not hard to say, if these people are involved doing it this way again, and this is what happened last time, it's probably going to happen again. This is important, because these people are getting more and more and more sophisticated at branding and marketing, which is what this is really all about. So as a guy that used to do branding and marketing for a living, I'm going to come at this from that analysis point. Let's look at who's paying the bill, and we always know the guy that pays the bill gets to pick where you're going for dinner, right? That's how it works. The people that fund the scientific study determine the outcome of the study before the study starts. We all know this is a pattern. This is a class today, not just in what's really going on and what the agenda is, but really what the class is about when we get to my segment is pattern recognition, and using logic and reason and the pattern to determine the potential outcome, and then to take that potential outcome and verify it by backtracking through the pattern to find the sources and people behind the activity, right? It's going to be a college-level course in 20 minutes on figuring out what's really going on when you look at something on the surface and go, that sounds, No Kings, that sounds pretty good. I got people on Facebook saying, Jack, we got rid of a king before back in 1776, and that worked out really well. Yeah, okay, sure, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing you're getting rid of King George. Yeah, sure it is. You're being duped again. Many of you aren't, but many of your friends and family are. I want to give you the ammunition, if you have a conversation with them, not to say, hey, you're a stupid head, but to say, well, here's what's going on. And I've got 9 sources to back up every single claim I'm making today. You can determine for yourself if what I'm telling you is the truth, which is what I always recommend. With that, before we jump into it, let me remind you guys you can always help support this show. How? By doing your online shopping, starting at tspaz.com. That's TSPAZ, tspaz.com. Today's item of the day is one I brought around many times before because it's on sale again. In fact, this was the top 4, number 4, best-selling item on T-Spaz in 2024. It is the Anker Soundcore waterproof Bluetooth speaker. These are the little ones that pair, meaning you get 2 of them and you can pair them for true stereo sound. So you got both of them acting like dual stereo speakers, or you can use them individually. I use these out in my shop all the time, my back shop that doesn't have full AV in it, and it works great. They are IP7, I think. IPX7 waterproof. Basically, you can take this thing and chunk it in the pool and it won't die on you. IPX7 is the rating on them. That's about as waterproof as electronic devices get, unless they're like specially made for the Navy or some shit like that. This thing's great. It's on sale right now for about $30, which means you can buy a pair of them for $60. That's a deal. People buy these all the time off T-Spaz and pay 35% more for them and never complain about it. I've sold hundreds, if not, I bet you if I go run the numbers over like the past 3 years, I bet you I've sold over 1,000 of these. And no one has ever written me an email saying they didn't like it, they had to return it, they had a problem with it. And remember, if you do have a problem with a product from Anker, they're going to fix it. They're not even going to question you. I've had one product I've bought in probably about 6 years of recommending Anker that had a problem. When I filed the thing, it just said, keep it. Here's a new one. That's just the kind of company they are. That's the kind of company I like to recommend. The Anker Soundcore waterproof Bluetooth speaker. And if you haven't picked up a copy of Laws of Life yet, please do so. Some people have been asking for autographed copies. When I'm sure that the corrected version of the book is shipping, I'll order a case of author copies, and maybe I'll set up a way to do that. I don't know, because we have to ship it, and I'll maybe ship it at $25. If you'd be interested in an autographed copy, that'll give me kind of an idea if I should do this or not, email me and put TSPC Laws of Life in the subject line and tell me you'd be interested in that. And, it's $25. If that's not out of the realm of what you would do, let me know, because that's about how much it's going to take to get me to do it. It's not that I object to signing books. It's having a physical shippable product. It's not something we do around here. We're not set up for it, so it would have to be enough people interested in it that aren't going to say, but it's only $17 on Amazon. Yeah, but I have to order it. I have to have it shipped here. I have to sign it. I have to address it to you, and I have to mail it to you. And I ain't going to make that much money doing it, so I would be doing it as a service to people that really want it. That's the way I look at it. Anyway, with that, let's go ahead and jump off into it and hear from Ron Paul and Chris Rossini in decade after decade after decade after decade of promises broken.
But lately, economics is a big issue, mainly because it's narrowed down to a fight going on right now between 2 individuals that have high name recognition in this country, the president and Musk. All of a sudden, that partnership they have doesn't seem to be much of a partnership. I think they've been yelling and screaming at each other, and it doesn't surprise me, not that I know their personalities and their characters and I can predict that, but I think when we set off to solve our problems and you don't understand what's really going on as a bankruptcy and nobody wants to admit it.
The bottom line, if I was to say it, is that Republicans never deliver, ever. You could give them every single position in the government, give them all the levers of power, and they constantly disappoint decade after decade, and they don't care. They don't care because they've gotten away with it for so long. But now there's a big change. What they normally do is they campaign like libertarians. Oh, there's small government, limited government. We're going to reduce those taxes. Those crazy Democrats, we got to stop them. They campaign like libertarians, and then once they're in power, they govern exactly like the Democrats, sometimes even worse than the Democrats. And especially in this last election, was there a libertarian tone with Elon, with Vivek. This was going to be different this time. And, enough time went by, people's emotions calmed down, and the Republicans went right back to their normal playbook. We got this big, beautiful monstrosity bill that no one could read again, and it contains more debt, more deficits, more spending. It's as if that election meant nothing, the exact opposite. And Elon, now they're messing with a big counterforce. Elon had enough. And he's showing us that he was serious. And what did he do? He went to the best man in the House, Thomas Massie, who Trump trashed, and the best man in the Senate, Rand Paul, who Trump also trashed, and went and backed them up. I mean, what a amazing, amazing thing. And he's saying this is unacceptable. This is not what this last election was supposed to be. We need a slim and beautiful bill, not a big, beautiful bill. And you were supposed to stick to what you were elected to do. So obviously, you know where the Ron Paul Liberty Report stands on this argument. But these are now exciting times again that we live in, and hopefully it turns out well.
Except, this is an excerpt from a show on the Liberty Report this week, and since that episode was done, what has happened? Well, yesterday, Elon went and kissed the orange ring and apologized to Trump for all the nasty things that he said about him, and Trump said, yeah, I think I'm willing to forgive him, so the bromance is back on, at least to a degree. It might be a little cooler than it used to be, but it's back. And this is the reality. Getting shit done in government is hard. Especially when you're trying to get shit done that's actually reducing spending and reducing government power. And that's the reason the Republicans let you down. It's not. People often say the Democrats are more honest. They say they're going to do things and then they go do it. No, they actually don't. They actually don't do things the way that they said they would do them. They appear more honest than Republicans because basically what Democrats promise is more restrictions on people and more power for government and spending more money. So they do that. They keep that promise, but what they promise to do as that happens is never met either. The reality is that politicians are controlled by people that want more power for government because they pay government to do what they want with the power the way they want it done. Okay, so the oligarchs, they're not oligarchs like I heard on TV yesterday. I wanted to shoot myself in my head. Oligarch? What the fuck is an oligarch? Anyway, oligarchs love government because they control the reins of government. So they want government to have more power to squash their competition with. Now, these oligarchs, not oligarchs, they fund both sides of the mafia war. Just like bankers always fund both sides of actual hot on-the-ground wars, knowing that way whoever wins will be ingratiated to them and whoever loses will be indebted to them. And the winner will make the loser pay the debt. See how it works? That's exactly what they do with the government. They fund the Republicans and they fund the Democrats, and that way they control both. They put shock collars on them, and whenever they think about going off the reservations, they give them a couple warning, beep, 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 like you do a dog, and then zap! You want your money? You want to keep your seat? Huh? You want a future? You better do what you're told, bitch. And most of them do. That's what's really going on. Anyway, let's go on to other things. How about paying the government less damn money? In this case, it ain't really the federal government we're talking about. It's state governments. And the worst among them, Matthew mentions by name, California and New York. Let me tell you, Illinois is pretty freaking hot on this too. At one time, one of the companies I used to be an owner in with Neil Franklin, we ended up having to pay over $275,000 to the state of California for bullshit like this. And we legitimately shouldn't have had to, but in the end it was a higher expense to fight than to just pay the damn bill and say, fine, we're not sending anybody to California anymore. Anyway, with that, let's find out what the Amtrak Act really is. Does it really have anything to do with choo-choo trains? Sort of, but kind of, but no.
Hey, TSP crew. This is Matthew Searsley, the Agorist Tax Advisor, here to answer another listener question. Question. Could you explain the tax implications of the Amtrak ruling? Details. I live in New Hampshire and worked in Vermont as a CDL commercial driver. I drive in both states. Another employee at my company was told by a tax professional about the Amtrak ruling. I was told that we do not have to pay a VA state income tax because he lived in New Hampshire. Is it true I do not need to pay an income tax? Generally, yes, although it probably is, I think, the Amtrak rule or Amtrak law that you're talking about, not a particular court ruling. So first of all, let's talk about basics. Normally, if you work in a state, that state can tax the income you earn there, even if you don't live there. This really sucks for people who travel for work. My father was a traveling consultant doing computer stuff. We lived in Texas, but he regularly had to file New York and California income taxes for the time he was working in another state. This really screws professional athletes and entertainers as well. By the way, watch out. New York is particularly nasty about this, that if you are a remote worker working for a New York company, they may say you owe the income tax. Just another reason to avoid New York. However, the federal government passed some rules for certain people that change this default rule. And so the first one that I'm aware of is the Amtrak Act. It's a federal law that says states cannot tax the wages of a non-resident if they work for a motor carrier or a rail carrier and they perform their duties in more than one state and they do something regarding transportation. So this law applies to you. You live in one state, you work in multiple states, you drive for them, no state income taxes on any state other than the state you reside in, and that's New Hampshire, which has no income tax. So yes, you should be free of Vermont taxes. However, there are rules about who is covered and who isn't. The basics are you have to be a W-2 employee of a motor or rail carrier, and you have to perform duties of driving for that company in multiple states. So if you are a 1099 contractor, paid just and you do report everything on a Schedule C, this does not apply to you. Hint, if you create a company and hire yourself as an employee and pay yourself a W-2, well, at least that W-2 part now is not taxable, though some of your business profits may be. This also does not apply if you live in one state and work in another state. So if you live in New Hampshire, but all of your driving is in Vermont, then Vermont can tax your income. This does not apply to any portion of your compensation having to do with remote work, consulting, or dispatching. It only counts when you are physically on or using or moving or loading or unloading a truck or a rail car. Now, this is not the only law that works this way. There are other laws that are similar to this. The best other one I know about is a similar law that applies to people in the military and their spouses. So if you are a military spouse and you have a job and you have to go to another state because your spouse has been transferred there, that new state is not supposed to tax your income. Now, a lot of the times they do because you need to jump through some hoops for this law to actually apply to you, file some forms. But, this is absolutely fantastic. There is a similar thing that actually applies to people in the military or people in the reserve who are forced to go someplace else. And maybe they're doing a job on the side because it's like, yeah, you're here, but you have off time. Your income cannot be taxed outside of your main state of residence. There's also a similar law that applies to pilots and flight crews for not paying in multiple states. But watch out, that only applies to state income tax. If you end up flying to other countries, there may be income tax on that income. Finally, there's a very narrow law that talks about pension income, and it says that states can't tax retirement income of non-residents. And again, that's because normally you get taxed based on your time in a state. So let's say you were, visiting another state for 30 days and you had a job in that state, they could charge you, tax on that income. That doesn't apply to pension income only. Now, again, this gets a little bit complicated if you're an owner-operator. If you're just a regular owner operator doing this on a Schedule C, you're going to pay income tax on every single state. Another reason why, as a truck driver, I can't think of a single reason you should be operating as a Schedule C instead of as an S Corp somehow. My reading of the law, and it is a bit ambiguous, is that it does only apply to the W-2 salary portion. So if you're doing the standard tax trick with an S Corp and saving money by not paying all those employment taxes, you will owe income tax on that portion. I don't think there's any situation where you aren't still saving money by doing that. But I would double check if you're in California or New York or New Jersey or Portland or other areas where there might be a business tax or where there might be some sort of a city or county tax. So if you are a driver and you don't have a CPA or an attorney, get one. You want to be able to make sure you're doing all this correctly. So for your actual question, as far as I can tell in your case, yeah, you should not be paying any income taxes in New Hampshire. And oh, by the way, you can file amended returns in most states up to 3 years after they're due to get that money back if you have been paying. So I would definitely do that. If you are a normal person who none of these laws apply to, it's a little bit trickier. Technically, you do need to pay income tax on any income you earn from other states. Now, if you work 2 days in another state, are they going to know? Probably not. Even if they do, most states do have some sort of a standard deduction where you still won't owe. But if you're working someplace else for weeks or months, and there are none of these laws that apply to you, you need to be ready to pay income tax in those other states. Well, thanks everyone for listening to this. Please reach out to me if you have any questions at agristtaxadvice.com/TSP. I'd love to help you out.
This entire thing, and I'm not talking about the Amtrak Act that creates an exception to it, is scumbaggery. It is absolute scumbaggery, and he's right that New York and California are the ones that most often go after this. This is almost impossible to deal with as well when you are in certain professions. Like, it just doesn't make it. Well, what income did I earn if I'm a traveling if I travel for sales, for instance, and I live in Texas, and I go to a state like Louisiana that has a state income tax, and I visit a customer when I'm there, and I don't get an order while I'm there, right? But later I get an order from that customer for, let's say, $500,000 worth of equipment, and then I have a commission on that. Is that tax? You see what I mean? It's just nonsense. And this is why actually the vast majority of states, if you're not actually like residing there while you work there, it's not like you're in and out, like what I just described, but you're actually going there and physically working on site, then and doing labor there, generally it's not. And even when you do that, it's not going to come up. I used to, a long time ago, I'm sure the statute of limitations on this is up, so I ain't worried about saying it. I used to work for a company called Aerotech as a contractor, and the customer was actually MCI. That tells you how so long ago it is. Some of you are like, MCI? What the hell's an MCI? Do they make chips? They used to do this stuff called long distance, when you would pick up your phone in your house that was plugged into your wall. Even if it was a cordless phone, the base unit was plugged into your jack in your wall. And when you made a phone call to like another state, there was a long distance charge. And MCI was a long distance carrier. And we would go and we would build out central office facilities throughout Texas, but also like in Louisiana and Oklahoma and Arkansas. And technically, I guess we should have been paying state income tax while we were there. No one ever did. But I'll tell you, that type of work is done all over the place, and the states that will absolutely viciously come after you for it, New York and California. So it's good to know about. And that way, let's say you're in that mode, you just may not want to go to states like New York and California if you can avoid it, if you can kind of pick your own thing. I know a lot of people that travel for work, and I know very few of them that actually do this. But you should know about the problem it can create so that you can take actions to avoid it. All right, let's talk with Andy right now, Andy McCann from CrossFit Garage, about fitness, specifically intensity and frequency, and which one should we rely more on?
Hello and good morning, guys. This is Andy McCann coming to you from Woodstock, Georgia, where I own CrossFit Garage. If you are local, come join us. If you're not, we have got, if you go to my website, crossfitgarage.com/free, or hover over gym information and go down to free resources, you're going to see everything that I've put out for you guys that you can use. Go there and check it out. Okay, so today's question. This is actually 2 texts and 1 conversation I had at the gym that I'm putting together, okay? And it goes something like this. Andy, you talk about intensity, but how much intensity is too much intensity, and how does it come into play with my fitness? What level should I be at? So CrossFit methodology is constantly varied functional movements executed at high intensity. I add on there, sometimes. You can't go full tilt all the time. It just doesn't work. So I'm going to give you some quotes, some tacky things to live by, then I'll explain it a bit more. All right, tacky saying number 1, it is better to show up at 75% 5 days a week than 110% once and then have to skip 3 days because you're wrecked. Quote number 2, you don't get fit from the workouts you skip. This is probably the best one of all. If your workout ruins your week, it wasn't a workout, it was a setback. Okay, so your job is to find both consistency and intensity and put those together. Yes, you may go over the line sometimes, but I would say if you're going to err on the side of consistency. It's been about 17 years for my health and fitness journey, and it was way back in, I was 32, and we were playing flag football with our college buddies. We still had our fraternity, Beta Theta Pi, out of Georgia Tech, a bunch of nerds playing flag football, and I just could not pull anybody's flags. I was a rusher. I missed everybody's flags. I'm like, what is going on with me? I found CrossFit. This is where it started. So 17, actually, how long is that? That's 18 years because I'm 51. That's more than that. So 18-ish years of being on this fitness journey, I can tell you this. Showing up is way more important. At our gym, rule number 1 is show up. Rule number 2 is don't do anything stupid today to prevent yourself from showing up tomorrow. Rule number 3 varies. It's just whatever's funny, so we'll put it in there. But that's the main thing. You need to look at what you're doing so that you can continue tomorrow. If you feel like, I could have done more, that's great. So today, I could have done more. Tomorrow, see what a little more looks like. I like to keep it constantly varied and functional, but you do you. Maybe you're out for a jog. Maybe you're going for a run. Maybe you're doing hill repeats. It doesn't really matter. Too much intensity, if it wrecks you, is the wrong level of intensity. You could say this about anything, right? Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So guys, take it slow, grow into it. I tell everyone, take a honeymoon month and build into whatever fitness routine you're doing. If you guys need help, I am happy to help you for free. If you will log your food for 2 weeks, then I will talk with you because I know you're putting the time into it. If you don't want to log your food and you just want to talk, I'm $1,000 an hour, so go log your food and we'll talk. I also have that crossfitgarage.com/free with a whole bunch of resources for you over there. If you've got questions, text me, call me. I answer these. I talk to people all the time. I love this community. I am trying to be better about being on Instagram. Find me in there, ask me some questions. I'm in the many of the channels that the TSPC has, so just look me up. I think my name's the same in there. Let me go check. Yeah, it looks like if you do @Andy McCann, then that's me, so you can find me. Guys, I am here if you need me. You don't have to go along on your health journey. If you listen to Ken's stuff, man, his transformation has been great, and he didn't have to do much. I think he said he started off with doing the 60 Easy from my website. Go there, try it. Connect with me. I am here to help. I hope to see you guys this fall at the workshop, and I hope to do something cool. I've been talking to a few gyms out there about either renting some gear or renting some time and some space, so that may be on the table. We'll see. All right, guys, y'all take care.
You know, there was a time early on in the days of CrossFit where it was really plagued with injuries is what I'm trying to say there, get my foot out of my mouth. So much so that like SNL used to do skits on it where the guy'd go to pick the barbell up and his arms would get ripped off and he'd be bleeding and it's great, I feel the burn, stuff like that. There legitimately was a time where it was like that to a large degree, and there are still some CrossFit gyms and stuff like that where there's more injuries than there should be. but most of the people that are guiding people through CrossFit now are a lot more like Andy, and focusing on the fact that if you injure yourself today and you can't train for a week or 2 or 3 or more, then you've lost more than you've ever gained through that intensity. I think it was a great segment. And I think those sayings he said were a little quirky or stupid or whatever. They actually weren't. I think they were absolutely 100% valid. Moving on, will there be a big market sell-off soon? I don't know if big is the word, but there will be one. There generally is every summer.
Hello, TSP. Well, today I wanted to give you a heads up on what I think could be a possible sell-off in the stock market over the next month or so, sometime into the dog days of summer. And I don't think this will be as pronounced as the drawdown that we saw in April, but the modus operandi of the pump and dumpers on Wall Street will be the same. So what you want to watch for is some drummed up, hyped bad news. In April, they ran with a story that tariffs were going to totally destroy the economy, and rather than using real data, they create negative investor sentiment surveys and they go out and find contrived forecasts like last quarter from the Atlanta Federal Reserve that was projecting extreme negative GDP growth for the first quarter. At one point, they were talking about growth dropping off by more than 3%, and although that prediction never came to pass and was totally absurd, the media ran with it and promoted it as the next, gloom and doom scenario. Oh, incidentally, if you're paying attention to the Atlanta Federal Reserve's current forecast for GDP, which, by the way, I would encourage you not to, because it's totally ridiculous, but I track it because I'm a professional, I have to. Right now, the Atlanta Fed's second quarter GDP forecast is as absurd to the upside as last quarter's was to the downside. Just about a week or so ago, they were predicting second quarter GDP growth of over 4%, and right now they've lowered it and they're somewhere predicting about a 3% growth rate for the economy, but even that is really strong, extremely resilient growth, probably higher than I think we'll get, but it just goes to show the nonsensical numbers that get thrown out, and that type of information will get picked up and amplified with the media as long as it goes along with whatever the media's narrative is. I'm digressing here. Hey, bottom line, I think you're going to start seeing a lot of stories that tell you how bad corporate profits are and that they're severely degrading, and you can expect corporate profits to decline by at least 70%. Now that sounds really scary, and it may in fact even come out to be true. But here's why I wouldn't worry about it very much. The reason that corporate profits may come in so light in second quarter is because they were extremely off the charts high in first quarter. During all the gloom and doom when people were worried that the economy was falling apart because of all the tentative tariffs, what actually happened was that the S&P 500 clocked in profits of around 13%. And so it makes sense that if you have one extraordinary quarter, that the next one is likely to be not as good. But when you average the two out, they work out just fine. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think you're going to see the media promulgating the negative story that corporate profits are going to be 4%, and that's such a huge decline from where we've been historically. And they're going to scare everybody, and they're going to try and create a sell-off. And then, of course, once everybody panics and sells, then the fat cats on Wall Street will come in and buy the dip. I can't predict the future, but I do think that that's likely to happen this summer. So watch for it. What I've done in recent days, as the market has recovered and it's back near record highs, I've made a reduction in some of my holdings that were long-term profits. I'm keeping that in a money market fund. And as opportunities present themselves, I'll be moving that back into the market. And certainly if we do get a 5 or 10% dip this summer, I'll be buying into it and taking advantage of it. Well, hey, that's what I'm anticipating. Until next time, as always, this is John Pugliano from Investable Wealth and the Wealth Studying Podcast.
I'm a little more of a pessimist than John and have a little less faith in people, including the fat cats, which he has no faith in, but I have less still. Like, you can be a negative instead of just a zero. Okay, so here's what I'm going to tell you is going to happen. It's far worse than he just said. So the fat cats hold lots of these stocks already. They're going to preemptively dump theirs and begin the dip, okay? Then drum up the sentiment, get people to freak out and dump ETFs and shit and mutual funds and their 401ks and retirement accounts, and then the retirement accounts are all drawn from because you'll be like, I can't lose my money, because all these people last time were screaming, my retirement's been destroyed, and it lasted like 5 minutes. All they had to do was nothing, right? But no, they all freaked out to get them to do it again. And that way they have their finances in massive reserve. They've already taken profits when they cause the dip, and then they'll buy the dip, often with all the money they made off of commissions while you sold your stocks. That's what's going to happen. And they know it's going to happen, and that level of coordination is done all the time, and it's why they push it through the media, because if the CEO of like BlackRock calls up the CEO of Fidelity, or even their director level people and all, and they coordinate that, if it just so happens that somebody in the government actually is doing their job on a random day, which doesn't happen often, but it occasionally does, right? Somebody gets a burr in their ass and wants to make a name for themselves, and that gets caught on like a recording. Oh, well, you got collusion, you got RICO, you got all kinds of shit. People are going to orange jumpsuit land. But if it just so happens that everybody's kind of wink, wink, nod, nod, it's time to dump some shit under the guise of trying to help you, let you know what's coming, then they coordinate their asses off. And at the same time they're doing this, they're running high-frequency trading in New Jersey, where people are literally paying, like these companies are paying more money for a server with a fiber optic cable that's 50 foot shorter than the other one, because that millisecond gives them an advantage in their algorithmic high-frequency trading under the auspices it's necessary to provide liquidity in the market. So yeah, they're going to do it all over again because they've done it before. This is exactly what they always do. You want to about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. That's why it's not really the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer anymore. That's a lie. That just sounds good. That's marketing, like our last segment we're going to talk about today. No, the rich get richer and the middle class get poorer. That's the real gimmick. The poor just get the middle class's money that the rich so valiantly steals from the middle class through taxation to give to the poor. Right? The rich get richer no matter what. Anyway, moving on. Let's hear about Elderberry from Carrie Brown.
Hey, TSP community. Carrie here with Strong Roots Resources, and today I'm going to answer a question that Ryan sent over to me. Ryan asked, how can I identify good patches of elderberry in the spring to harvest later in the summer? Details. I would like some tips on how to identify elderberry in the wild or when I'm driving, and I would like to make sure that the elderberries have a low probability of being sprayed or contaminated. Do you have any tips or tricks on where to best find them? So the answer is absolutely, and I would say that elderberry is one of the easiest to kind of hone your foraging skills. So in most cases, elderberry like to be on various types of edges. You are very likely to find them on roadsides, on creek banks, river banks. They're pretty prolific, and they're actually really tolerant of less than ideal soil. So my general rule is, if I were to forage off of my own land, especially busy roads, highways, and that sort of thing, high traffic count, you're going to get a lot of particulates, you're going to get a lot of stuff running off the road into the soil. So I'm just going to steer clear of those. It's not to say that I wouldn't collect cuttings at the end of winter to propagate, especially if I think it's a different kind of variety, or if I want to get more more resilience built in by propagating from different sites. That's one option for sure. So that's going to be an early spring / more so late winter opportunity to gather hardwood cuttings and get them rooted. And I'm going to link a video that's all about doing that to cover that particular topic. So kind of the way I eyeball it is light traffic, and I'm certain that the area is not sprayed. So I go with basically areas I know. So in one instance, there's kind of a county road, very lightly traveled road, that does duck under some railroad tracks, but the berries are probably 30-40 feet away from the tracks, and these shrubs are always super prolific. I'm relatively certain they don't spray because I do know that they mow. So they take the big mowers, the big tractors with the mowers, and tend to cut stuff back, which means those shrubs are super productive. They respond very vigorously to being pruned in that manner, and frankly, they're one of the most resilient out there. You really can't kill them, to be honest. They could even be considered weedy in certain situations. So, in terms of ID aspects, at a glance to the untrained eye, elderberry flower and giant hogweed and poisonous hemlock can look similar. The big white flowers, the flower clusters, those can all, like I said, at 55 miles an hour, even I would be like, I'm not 100% sure what I just saw. So I'm going to want to take a closer look. The elderberry, the flower clusters are going to be relatively large. 6 inches. I've had some even get to 8 to 10 inches diameter. They can get really big. And your leaves are really what is going to be your giveaway. So elderberry leaves are arranged in they call it a pennant style. So kind of look that up, understand what that means. I'm not sure my description would do a ton of good in the audio format. And all of your hemlock and the things that are kind of looking like your carrot family, those are nowhere even close, and nowhere near the height. So the elderberry they're going to be pretty tall. I mean, mine that I pulled off of American elderberry cuttings off of a wild site, they're 8 to 12 feet. It's hard, that as they get weighed down with berries, they kind of, bend themselves over. But when they're kind of in their early form before they fully fill out in leaf, they're 8 to 10 feet tall. And most of these other specimens are not going to be that tall. The other factor that you just need to be able to observe this over several weeks is what happens after it flowers. So elderberries will make these very large, heavy, distinctive clusters of typically very dark purple to even black berries. And these kind of lookalikes, the hemlock and such, they're just going to go to seed. So there's not even going to be a fruit to harvest. So that's kind of another way to distinguish those things. Also, while we're at it, Queen Anne's lace and poison hemlock, there's a lot of conversation about telling these guys apart. A couple of little details to remember you can bring up in your mind when you're kind of out and about is Queen Anne's lace. The queen has hairy legs. It's kind of funny, but those stems are always fuzzy. Hemlock, as it grows, the stem will get dark purple blotches. It will not have hairs on it, and that stem will also be hollow. So those are details to look for so you don't get into something that's going to make you feel pretty terrible. So check out the YouTube video that I'll include here. I actually think there's going to be a couple. I've got one on propagating, and I've got one on identifying and using and harvesting and that sort of thing. 2 more quick details I wanted to throw at you. When it has set berries, it is so much easier if you just kind of bend a limb over and just clip that whole cluster off. The berries are very soft, and you'll kind of make a giant mess, and you'll dye yourself purple if you try to pick them individually. So clip the whole thing off. What I usually do is kind of loosely fill a few paper bags, drop them down into the chest freezer for just a couple of hours, let them set up real good, and then I'll pull them back out, and I will just shake that cluster in the bag. And you'll usually be able to harvest off about, 75-85% of the berries that way without really having to pick them. And then we throw them back into the freezer for later for making teas. Or I don't make a ton of stuff from mine because I know so many people who do. So I just kind of tend to pass them off to people who want to make the medicines or dry them for teas or whatnot. And then I get a little bit of product back in return. And that works out great for me. So that's your elderberries. They are very prolific. once you start seeing them, you will see them everywhere. They will catch your attention. You'll start being able to, you'll notice them mostly in their flowering stage, and then you'll even start noticing the way the stem structure looks in their more dormant stage, which is a great time to collect your cuttings. And elderberry cuttings are one of the very easiest to root. So if you want to start honing your propagation skills with a very forgiving specimen, elderberry is going to be the one to go to. So thank you guys for listening. Check out the links, and if I can help you out with anything on your property and homestead projects, especially pertaining around understanding the landscape, give me a shout. strongrootsresources@gmail.com, and we'll talk to you next time.
So next up, my segment, which is going to be on this no kings bullshit, and I want to let you guys know I'm going to be turning that into a video segment of about 20 minutes in length that you'll be able to share with friends or families or frenemies or people you're debating with or anybody you think might listen to it if they actually want the truth. And I think the most important thing about what you're about to hear from me is that it doesn't really have anything to do with Trump. Because whenever I bring up all the things you're about to hear about with anybody online, but Trump this and he took an oath and all these appeals to emotion and appeal to authority fallacies and red herrings and all this other bullshit, which then they turn around and accuse you of, I'm not defending anything Trump did or didn't do. I'm talking about this movement, who's funding it, where it's coming from, and what the goal is. And if you stick to that and you look at the patterns you're about to see unveiled, there's really only one conclusion you can come to if you're a thinking, reasoning person that is acting out of logic and reason versus emotion and anger and TDS. All right, guys, so my segment today, we're going to talk about this No Kings thing that's supposed to happen on Saturday and the overall movement, because whatever does or does not happen on Saturday, it's not the end of it. Of course, this was all kicked off with a new version of the LA riots. I want to explain why we're going to have this for a segment today, though, before I go into it. So, you're not going to stop this, and my advice to you is to stay the hell away from it. And the only reason I want you to ever engage anybody in it and maybe give them this segment, because I'm going to make this a standalone video too, is if they start telling you how wonderful it is. And that person's not some neo-Marxist idiot. They're a decent, good person who simply believes the messaging that's coming at them. And I think this will be a good tool for those people, because there are people that are going to get sucked into this that they mean well, they would go peacefully protest, or more likely, most productive people don't go peacefully protest. What they do is write checks to organizations. And if you're going to do that, go ahead. I think anybody that really understands what this is, that really wants to back it, you should go ahead and do it. I know that's hard for you to believe when I say something like that, but I mean it. I've always said, believe whatever you want, but know why you believe what you believe. The other side of it is, this segment, I hope, will be a textbook lesson in two things: pattern recognition, and real resource. When I'm done with this segment, you can go look up, whether you're listening to it, the video online, or the segment in the audio podcast, you can go to either the video notes or the podcast notes. I have absolute ironclad sourcing for everything that I'm going to say today. And I'll tell you this, there will people that will be very upset about what I have to say today. Not a single one of them will refute a single fact with proof, with evidence, with facts, with logic, with reason, with source. Instead, they'll shriek emotional pleading, which is a form of fallacy. They'll use, a fallacy of appeal to authority. Well, this person over here says you're wrong. Or they won't even go that far. They'll say something stupid like, but I read somewhere. I love that one. You read somewhere. Where? Where in the sum did you read? What is your source? And how far did you go? Because if you read one or two things put out by, let's say, the AP, you don't have any idea what's going on. What you have is a bad case of Gelman amnesia. The people say, I read somewhere. I guarantee you, wherever the somewhere is that they read from, they've read something else from that source that they were actually informed about, and they were like, well, that's not right. But then they turned the page, because Gelman amnesia was coined by Michael Crichton. He's the guy that created Jurassic Park and ER and some other wonderful things. And when he coined the phrase Gelman amnesia, it was back in the 70s when people still read newspapers. So today, you go to the next screenshot, you read something from the same source, and you believe it because it sounds right, because you're not informed. If you get informed about this, there's only so much of a conclusion you come to. So let's go into, is the basic introduction of what this is supposed to be. No King's protest They're being pitched as a mass grassroots uprising, a spontaneous rejection of authoritarianism. But when you pull back the curtain, what you find isn't a groundswell of public frustration. It's a top-down orchestration funded by massive political organizations and old players with very familiar agendas. This isn't about telling anybody what to think, what I'm trying to do today. It's about laying out the facts, following the money, and letting people decide if they will look at the facts. Do I still believe this? Is this a true people's movement? Or is it just another round of elite manipulation in street-level clothing? Because that's what I'm going to tell you I feel that it is. Let me lay out why. The first thing we always have in these types of movements is the facade of grassroots. And I've seen this in many things. Many, many, many years before the recent time that we heard the term net neutrality and how if that happened and we didn't do it the way they wanted to do it, the internet was going to end, and then Trump did it, and nothing's been changed since, and everything still works. And that's been 10 years. 15 years before that, that was being thrown around with a hands-off of the internet movement. It was a groundswell of public support. It was all astroturfed. Same thing's going on here. The surface of the No Kings movement looks like a spontaneous, decentralized uprising. Thousands of events popping up across the country, totally organically. But it's being organized by over 100 groups. And those groups are being led by a specific group known as Indivisible. They are a political nonprofit, and they were started by former Democratic congressional staffers. There's your partisan angle right there, okay? There's not a single Republican involved in that group. This is 100% former Democratic staffers, and I dare say that those staffers tend to be actually worse than the people that they serve, the politician they represent. And I mean that on both sides of the aisle, too. The Republicans, I would say the same thing. This isn't new, though. These are the same types of organizers who were behind the resistance campaigns against Trump in 2017. In fact, some of them are the same exact people. The messaging is unified. The branding is polished, and the logistics are too well oiled to be a coincidence. This is a strategy, not spontaneity. Guys, I used to consult to major brands in developing their branding and their messaging. This is as polished as anything that we would deliver back in those days. It's the same formula. It's branding and marketing. And you are the target of the branding and the marketing. And ask yourself, when a company brands and targets a market and you're the market, are they worried about whether or not it's the best thing for you? Or do you accept the message and will you act on the message? I don't care if it's a political organization, freaking Nike or Apple or whoever. When somebody formulates and brands a message to you, what they care about is your reaction, not your benefit. Next, you got to look at whenever anything like this happens, who's got the money? I know it's a Walmart era. She's paying for it all. That's a distraction. That's the pretty lady in the bikini, even though she ain't one. Right? That's the pretty lady in the bikini on the stage with the little flower, with the feather fans when the magician is making something appear, and that's so you look at her instead of what's really going on. That's a fraction of the funding. I'm not saying she's not doing it. I'm saying she ain't doing anywhere near enough to account for all of this. No, where is it? Okay, Indivisible alone has taken over $7 million from the Open Society Foundations that are backed by George Soros. So the ringleader in this has gotten $7 million from the Soros Foundations. That's one piece. Groups like Black Votes Matter and the Tides Foundation are funneling money into this network, either directly or through fiscal sponsors. Tides is a master at this. They launder money through donor-advised funds to avoid transparency. In other words, they want to fund it, but they don't want anybody able to prove that they did. But you can track it down and find it if you look for it. Some of these protests are also indirectly supported by federal grant money through agencies like, you guessed it, USAID. So you got the NGO, they get money from USAID because we have to save the world, so we give an NGO operating domestically the money to save the world with, and they fund the protest that burns down your business. Isn't that wonderful? So when you follow the dollars, you're going to find a tight circle of high-dollar donors that are shaping the entire thing. And who gets to dictate the results? The person that pays for it gets to dictate the results. It's a foretold outcome. We're funding it. Here's the branding. You're going to get the result that you're looking for. And that result is not to help you or help minorities or help illegal immigrants or stop kings. And notice the plural, kings. It ain't kings. It stopped Trump. They just determined that was a better brand. A bunch of people sat around a great big ass expensive conference table and formulated a brand here. I'm telling you, I used to do this for multi-million-dollar and in some cases billion-dollar companies. It's the same format. It's a shell game as well. It's obscuring accountability. This is just, the shell corporation that moved the money to this place, to this place, to this place, so this asshole that they told you to be mad at doesn't have to pay taxes? You think that's the only thing they do with money like that? No. See, the organizational structure is designed to blur responsibility. The Tides Foundation, for instance, serves as a fiscal sponsor for many smaller groups. And that means it legally houses them under one umbrella and often under one roof. And this gives cover. Journalists can't follow the money easily, and the IRS doesn't force disclosures the same way for these types of organizations, specifically not just nonprofits, but NGOs that are registered with the government to receive government funding. They get a big pass on a lot of this shit, okay? These groups will then supposedly be independent. It's, group A, B, C, and D, yet, they're not. They will share the same address. They will use the same staff, the same consultants, even the same branding assets, and yet claim to be independent. It's a maze of entities designed to deflect scrutiny while centralizing control. And then you go into what the media does for this. Now, we all know, and even if you want to resist this, you really should have like a discussion with the man in the mirror. Like, even if you are on the left, if you are a Democrat, if you support democratic ideals, right? And I mean Democratic Party ideals, DNC, you write them checks, whatever. Again, you can believe whatever you want as long as you know why you believe what you believe, okay? But we should all acknowledge that MSNBC, CNN, AP, Reuters, etc., all of these people are in the tank for the left. The majority of journalists are leftists. They went to leftist universities under leftist professors to learn leftist journalism and leftist agendas. Again, you can believe that's a good thing, but don't deny its reality. They're not independent. So once we have this branded message, we also have contacts in the media at high levels that will then funnel it the way it wants to be funneled by the people that paid for it, the branding masters. Again, this is the PR formula to market a company. You do the same thing to market a widget or a gadget that you want people to spend money on. It's the same formula. It's marketing. So then you get the media and institutions to amplify it. The media will play right into it. Legacy outlets will frame No Kings as a grassroots uprising and downplay or completely ignore the financial and institutional ties. Maybe they'll throw you a bone. Walmart heiress. Yeah, like she paid for all of this in over 200 cities across the country. Sure she did. Okay? No. The same media outlets often receive funding or sponsorship from the foundations tied to the same networks organizing their protests. Fund both sides or fund both teams on the same side. Again, a formula as old as time. Meanwhile, the government agencies like USAID are cutting multi-million-dollar checks to groups that later show up on the ground as activists. Your tax dollars are paying for you to be messaged to in a completely coordinated manner, and you swallow it right down. This isn't just narrative control, it's collaboration. The state and the media ecosystem work together to sell a story the public is suspected to buy uncritically. You're not allowed to criticize this. If you do, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're a xenophobe. We'll get to that in point 7. Moving on to point 6. What we should take from this is recurring patterns. If we've seen something before, when we see it again, we should recognize it instantly. This is why tic-tac-toe is a boring game, right? Once you learn the pattern of tic-tac-toe, you never lose and you never win if both sides know it. It's always a draw. Remember the movie War Games from the 80s, right? How about a nice game of chess instead? That's how predictable the pattern is. Here's what happens. We see this exact playbook before. During the BLM protests, hundreds of millions of dollars were raised, often through, guess who? The Tides Foundation, Act Blue, and other intermediaries. But little of that money made it to actual community projects. Instead, the headlines eventually turned to what? Misused fund, real estate purchases, right? Missing accountability, minority-owned businesses where the majority of the businesses burned to the ground. Cities suffered. The promised transformations never came. Nobody's life got any better that actually lived in the places that they had all of these riots. The same groups and funders are now behind No Kings under a different banner. Well, except for one person, Patrice Cullors. She's no longer part of it. Who was she? She was the president of Black Lives Matter. She bought multiple multi-million-dollar real estate properties with the BLM money. They launched an investigation. Now she's going to pay. Boom! I remember the social media post. Boom! Finally, accountability. You know what accountability is? Absolutely nothing. There's a lawsuit against BLM, the organization, which is now functionally bankrupt anyway. There ain't going to be no money. Miss Patrice done hauled ass and left. She's never been fined. She's never faced any consequence whatsoever for basically embezzling money in the wide open, and she got away with it. That's what happened. Embezzled money in the wide open. No one's done a thing, and no one's ever going to do a thing. If you think somebody's ever going to do something about it, grow up. You're an adult. Put away childish things. And then we have to do something else. See, every once in a while, somebody like this speaks up, like I'm doing today. The problem is, though, that I'm an outsider. So my dissent here really doesn't mean that much unless you're willing to listen and learn. What really happens, though, when someone from within the community that is supposedly being helped speaks up against the movement, they're quickly labeled a traitor, or they're co-opted by the right. It doesn't do any good when these people finally speak up and say, let me tell you what's really happening. And then the right goes, we love you, come over here and spout our talking points. That's no better. That's not an independent voice. That's, I've been disowned, and now I have nothing, so these people will take me in. Like Walton Williams on Fox News, something like that. Then they're quickly labeled a traitor, co-opted by the right. Dissent even from fellow minorities or former supporters is shut down. You're not allowed to question where the money goes. That is racist. You are not allowed to ask what the leadership is doing. That means you're a fascist. Or why the outcomes never match the promises. That just means that you've turned your back on what you really believe. And you were just a shill for the right all along, or whatever else they come up with. The social and media pressures ensures groupthink in this always not reform. There's an illusion of consensus. It's critical to maintain the movement's perceived legitimacy. And we have a bigger word for all of this, and that word is Marxism. If you look at how every country that descended into any form of Marxism, whether it was classic Marxism, like China and Russia, or an Islamic form of Marxism like Iran, that's always what happens. You take the angry youth and you mobilize them, and you terrify the elderly of losing what they have left. You put all the people in the middle that work to keep the lights on every day into a sandwich, and your goal is to take over the country and institute your form of government and control. And remember, government is just a form of control. And then, we can look based on past patterns and see the consequences and make very accurate predictions of what's going to happen next. Based on past patterns, we know what's coming. Protests may escalate into riots. In fact, in some places they absolutely will. Urban damage is going to be most heavily felt in low-income minority communities, the very people that were supposedly uplifting by all this fiery but mostly peaceful protesting. And they'll be left with higher crime, lost businesses, and burned neighborhoods. Meanwhile, the organizers and nonprofits are going to walk away with more funding, more power, more connections, and more influence on the political process. These outcomes are not accidental. This is a direct result of the structure and incentives at play. Of course, the people paying the bill got to decide what you're ordering for dinner tonight. You see how that works? It's not hard. In conclusion, this is not about denying the right to protest, because I know that's what I'm going to be accused of, or pretending there are no real grievances out there, because above all people, I know there are. I don't want to hear that most of the people, are peacefully protesting as an excuse for the riots, right? You might not feel that way if the person that was hit in the head with a brick or a rock or a hunk of concrete or a piece of a cinder block was your daughter or your son or your brother or your mom or your grandma. think beyond yourself, because they like to put this shit on your TV and they like to pipe it into the living rooms of people that will never see it in person. So you're disconnected. Oh, that has to happen so this better thing can come. But the better thing never comes. But you buy into it because you're disconnected from the violence that's going on. Jeffrey Dahmer generally didn't eat people on a daily basis. It doesn't take away the fact that he killed people and ate them. It doesn't make it okay, because most of the time he was a nice guy to people. You got it? And yes, it is that drastic. And again, it's not about denying your right to protest. Protest all you want. The thing is, you have to understand that protesting generally doesn't work, and I'll explain why in a minute. What it's really about, though, here is reorganizing when a movement has been hijacked or built entirely from the top down. The No Kings narrative is compelling. It sounds good. It's good branding. As a branding expert, I would say they did a good job with it. Okay? But the receipts tell a different story. When we research the people behind it and where the money comes from, we don't get a No Kings organic, upset, populist result. No. When the protests are funded, planned, and broadcast by powerful interests, they're not protests anymore. They're, as I've been saying, marketing campaigns. Please know what you're looking at, because if you don't, you'll get used. Again, I don't care if you want to protest, but let me explain why protests tend to turn into violent riots. No one cares that you protest. No one cares. You can hold up all the cardboard signs, perfectly graphically printed or homemade. You can chant. You can sound like you're in 4th grade going, hell no, we won't go, or whatever other little chant you come up with. No one really gives a shit. So these people that organize these protests know the protests themselves are not actually going to get anything done. That won't work. If everybody came out, peacefully protested and went home, everybody like, that was interesting, let's move on with our lives. No. So you locate these protests in key strategic areas next to high crime neighborhoods. You draw in the public as peaceful protesters, and you draw in the people who will use any disruption as an excuse to raid an Apple store and steal phones and iPads. That's what you do. And that's what they've done every single time. Every single time. These are the people raiding these stores, by and large, are the same people that would do it if the power was out for 3 days or a storm hit. You already know where they are. You've already seen where it's happened before. This is actually easier than BLM because they had a test run in 2020. They know exactly what, and they have all these little ones too. They're not going to be anything. It's Atlanta. It's Dallas. It's LA. It's San Francisco. It's Seattle. It's Portland. It's Chicago. That's where they get what they want, which is violence and destruction. And then they'll turn around and blame the people that tried to prevent it for causing it, which they're already doing. Well, again, if you doubt anything I've said about these connections to the money, the people, whatever, in the notes, there is 9 specific references for you to check. Before you go telling me why I'm wrong, go verify what I've said to be correct or incorrect. And then we can have a discussion about it if you want to. I will discuss this with anybody as long as I'm doing it with a person who's actually informed. All right, and with that, I will wrap things up. Want to remind you, one of the ways you can always support this show is to do your online shopping, starting at tspaz.com. That's TSPAZ, tspaz.com. When you shop there, no matter what you buy online, you'll help support us, whether you get it from Amazon or Vivor. And if it's an item at Vivor, remember there's a discount code there that'll get you an additional 5% off your orders as well. But I mean, the big draw there is obviously Amazon. They pretty much have everything you can think of, and a lot of you are using it every day. So please just consider, go to TSPAZ first, use the links that are there, and you'll help us out. And you'll find all my great reviews categorized by category alphabetically too, so you can look things up and find things. Today's item of the day is not a prepper item at all. It's not a homestead item, other than I use it on my homestead all the time. It's Anker's Soundcore waterproof Bluetooth speaker. Again, this is what I mentioned at the beginning of the show. It's IPX7 waterproof. You can chunk it in a pool and it won't die. It is great. It has good sound. It pairs beautifully. It's a great product. If you like listening to music on the go and you don't want to be walking around with a $300 Bose or Beats speaker or something like that, because, sometimes those things tend to walk away when you're out and about. It's only $30. You're not going to be happy if somebody takes it, but you're also not going to have your life altered. And it's for the money. Man, the performance is great. In fact, you compare two of them. Again, I use this out in my back shop. When I'm in the garden, I have these really high pillars that hold up these trellises. And I set one on each side of the garden, and I'm out there just listening to my classic rock and country and all. You don't have to listen to classic rock and country. It'll work just fine for whatever you like. Check them out. And remember, Anchor just takes care of people. If they make a mistake, and it's rare, but if they make one, they fix it. Also, if you haven't done so yet, consider picking up a copy of my book, Laws of Life, Ditch the System, Design Your Life by yours truly, Jack Spirko. And I'll let you know, I just did a really great interview last week with Tom Woods. I hadn't realized he had actually released that podcast yet, but he did. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes today, put it in the Daily Mail. I shared it on social and all that today. But it might be interesting to hear me talk about the principles in the book with somebody else interviewing me instead of me in control of the conversation. And I think next week I'll be giving an interview to Billy Bond as well about the book as well. So anyway, take care, guys. Have a great weekend. I'll have a flashback for you tomorrow. That segment, I will be putting out a video sometime today, if not tomorrow, with some pictures added for interest and things like that. So you can share it as a one-off segment instead of a whole hour-and-a-half podcast. And again, have a great weekend. Make it
They said
productive.
you should have a house the American way. $1 down, $1 a month, and you'll never have to pay. There's a better way to do this. Let me show you a better way.